The colony ship Wanderer moved slowly through the darkness of space. It was a large vessel, carrying 3,000 people toward a new world in a distant star system. Captain Lisa Grant stood on the bridge, watching the stars through the main window. She had made this kind of journey many times before. It was supposed to be safe. It was supposed to be routine. Her daughter Sophie was somewhere on the lower decks, probably playing with the other children in the recreation area. Sophie was only 8 years old, with bright eyes and a curious mind. She loved space travel, loved looking out the windows at the distant stars and asking her mother questions about each one. Lisa smiled at the thought. In a few more weeks, they would reach their destination, and Sophie would have a whole new world to explore. Then everything changed. The alarms started screaming without warning. Red lights flashed across the bridge as crew members rushed to their stations. Lieutenant Kevin Morris was the first to see what was happening on the sensor display. His face went pale. "Captain, we have contacts. 3 large vessels, unknown configuration. They just appeared out of nowhere, less than 50 kilometers away." Lisa felt her heart freeze in her chest. Unknown vessels meant alien vessels. Humanity had been traveling among the stars for 200 years, but they had never made contact with another intelligent species. The galaxy had seemed empty, quiet, safe. It was not safe anymore. The alien ships were massive, larger than anything in the human fleet. Their hulls were not made of metal like human vessels. They seemed almost alive, covered in patterns of glowing light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Lisa had never seen anything so beautiful or so terrifying. "Raise shields," she ordered. "Power up all defensive systems. Send a distress signal to Earth immediately." But there was no time. Before the Wanderer could do anything, a beam of golden light shot out from the largest alien ship. It passed through the shields like they were not there. It passed through the hull without causing any damage. And then it was inside the ship, spreading through the corridors, like water through a pipe. Lisa watched on the internal cameras as the light moved through her vessel. Wherever it touched people, they simply vanished. One moment they were there, running or screaming or trying to hide. The next moment they were gone, leaving nothing behind. The light reached the recreation deck. Lisa screamed her daughter's name and ran for the door. But Kevin grabbed her arm. "Captain, you can't. There's nothing you can do." She fought against him, tears streaming down her face. On the camera display, she watched the light sweep through the area where the children had been playing. When it passed, the room was empty. Sophie was gone. The golden light withdrew as quickly as it had come, flowing back through the ship and returning to the alien vessels. Then the aliens vanished, jumping into some kind of faster-than-light travel that left no trace behind. The whole attack had lasted less than 3 minutes. Lisa stood on her bridge, surrounded by the sounds of crying and confusion. 73 people had been taken. Families had been torn apart. Children had been stolen from their parents, and she had been unable to do anything to stop it. The distress signal reached Earth 4 days later. It arrived at the headquarters of United Earth's Command, where Admiral Henry Cole was working late in his office. He was an old man, 62 years of experience written in the lines on his face. He had seen many things in his long career. He had thought nothing could surprise him anymore. He was wrong. As he read the report from the Wanderer, his hands began to shake. This was not the first incident. He knew that now. Over the past 3 years, there had been 17 similar events across human space. Ships that had lost crew members under mysterious circumstances, colonies where people had simply disappeared in the night. Each incident had been explained away as an accident or a malfunction or an unsolved mystery, but they were not accidents. They were attacks. Something was hunting humanity, taking people one small group at a time. And now that something had become bold enough to attack a major colony ship in broad daylight, Cole stood up from his desk and walked to the window. Outside, the lights of the city stretched toward the horizon. Billions of people lived on Earth, going about their daily lives, unaware of the danger that lurked among the stars. They trusted their government to protect them. They trusted their military to keep them safe. He could not let them down. There was a secure terminal in the corner of his office, one that he had never used in his entire career. It It was connected to a system that most people did not even know existed. Cole walked to it and entered a code that had not been used in over 400 years. The screen flickered to life, displaying words that made his old heart beat faster. Lazarus Protocol standing by. Authorization required for activation. Cole had heard the stories, like everyone else. Tales of a great fleet hidden somewhere in the solar system. Built before the collapse that had nearly destroyed human civilization 6 centuries ago. Ships from an age when humanity had not been peaceful explorers, but something else entirely. Something dangerous. Most people thought the stories were just legends, fairy tales told to children. Cole knew better. He had seen the classified files. He knew what humanity had once been capable of. He pressed his palm against the scanner. Authorization Cole, Henry J. Admiral, United Earth Command. Activate the Lazarus Protocol. Wake them up. Terminal processed his command for a long moment. Then it displayed a new message. Authorization confirmed. Lazarus Protocol activated. Awakening sequence initiated. Estimated time to full operational status, 14 days. Deep beneath the surface of the moon, in caverns that had been sealed for 400 years, ancient systems began to stir. Lights flickered on in chambers that had been dark since before anyone alive today had been born. Reactors that had been cold for centuries began to warm up again. And ships, hundreds of ships, started the long process of coming back to life. The galaxy did not know it yet, but everything was about to change. Humanity had tried to forget what it once was. They had buried their weapons and chosen peace. They had believed they would never need to fight again. They were wrong. Someone had taken their children. Someone had made humanity remember. And now the sleepers were waking up far away on a ship limping back toward Earth. Captain Lisa Grant held a picture of her daughter and made a silent promise. She would find Sophie. She would bring her home. And whoever had taken her would learn what a terrible mistake it had made. The stars continued to shine in the darkness of space, indifferent to the drama unfolding below. But somewhere out there, an ancient enemy was about to discover that some prey should never be hunted. Humanity was coming. And this time, they would not be peaceful. Dr. Maria Santos had spent her entire life searching for the truth. She was a historian, the best in her field, specializing in the time before the collapse. 600 years ago, human civilization had nearly been destroyed. The records from that era were broken, corrupted, deliberately erased by people who wanted to bury the past. But Maria had always believed that something important was hidden in those missing years. Something that the founders of the New Earth government had decided the world was not ready to know. Now she stood in a place that proved all her theories correct. The chamber was enormous. Stretching 4 kilometers beneath the surface of the moon, the ceiling was so high that it disappeared into shadow. And filling this impossible space were ships. Hundreds of ships, sitting in perfect rows like soldiers waiting for orders. They were covered in a thin layer of dust, but otherwise they looked brand new, as if they had been built yesterday instead of centuries ago. Maria walked forward slowly, her footsteps echoing in the silence. These ships were nothing like the vessels humanity used today. Modern ships were elegant and efficient, designed for exploration and trade. These ships were different. They were covered in weapons. Their hulls were thick and heavy, built to take damage and keep fighting. They were warships, pure and simple, designed for one purpose only: destruction. How is this possible? Asked Commander Daniel Pierce, walking beside her. He was a military officer, assigned to the expedition as a security liaison. He had never believed the stories about the Lazarus fleet. He was a practical man, who trusted only what he could see with his own eyes. Now he was seeing it, and he did not know what to think. The answer came from speakers mounted on the chamber walls. A computer voice, old and slightly distorted, filled the air. Welcome to Lazarus Vault 7. This facility contains 412 combat vessels from the pre-collapse era. All ships are currently in standby mode. Crew complement, 0. Awaiting further instructions. Maria approached the nearest ship and placed her hand on its hull. The metal was cold, alien in texture. It did not feel like anything she had touched before. These ships had been built with technology that humanity had lost during the collapse. They were relics of a forgotten age. Why were they hidden? Daniel asked. Why did our ancestors bury an entire fleet beneath the moon? Maria shook her head. I do not know yet, but I intend to find out. Admiral Henry Cole arrived 3 days later, accompanied by a team of engineers and the best pilots in the human fleet. They set up a temporary base in the main chamber and began the process of bringing the ancient ships back to life. It was slow, careful work. The technology was unfamiliar, and they could not afford to make mistakes. Captain Lisa Grant was among those who came to the vault. She had refused to stay behind on Earth while her daughter was still missing. The military had tried to tell her that she was too emotionally involved, that she needed to rest and recover. She had told them that she would rest when Sophie was safe. Until then, nothing would stop her. She spent her days helping with the reactivation efforts, learning everything she could about the ancient ships. At night, she lay awake in her quarters, staring at the ceiling and thinking about her daughter. Was Sophie still alive? Was she afraid? Did she know that her mother was coming for her? Lisa did not know the answers, but she refused to give up hope. The flagship was the last ship to be awakened. It was called the Avalon, and it was the largest vessel in the fleet. 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that the engineering teams could barely understand. When its reactor finally came online, the whole chamber seemed to vibrate with power. Commander Pierce was the first to step onto the Avalon's bridge. The room was dark at first, but lights began to flicker on as the ship recognized his presence. Display screens came to life. Control panels began to glow. And in the center of the room, a holographic projector activated, displaying a message that had been waiting for centuries. A woman appeared in the projection. She wore an unfamiliar uniform, dark and military. Her face was hard, her eyes tired. She looked like someone who had seen too much war. If you are watching this, she said, then humanity is in danger once again. We built these ships because we learned a terrible truth about the galaxy. It is not empty. It is not peaceful. There are things out there, ancient things, that see younger species as nothing more than resources to be harvested. The woman paused, her expression growing darker. We fought them once. Our ancestors, the first humans to travel among the stars. They encountered these predators, and they learned what happens to species that cannot defend themselves. So they built a fleet. Not for exploration, not for trade, for war. They drove the enemy back. They made them afraid. And then they sealed these ships away, hoping that humanity would never need them again. She stepped closer to the camera, her voice dropping to something almost like a whisper. But they knew. Deep down they knew that someday the predators would return. Someday humanity would need to fight again. So they created the Lazarus Protocol, a way to wake the fleet if the worst should happen. If you are seeing this message, then the worst has happened. The woman straightened up, her expression becoming cold and determined. Do not hesitate. Do not show mercy. The enemy will show you none. They see us as prey, as livestock, as raw material for their purposes. They have done this to countless species before us. They will do it again unless they are stopped. You have the tools now. Use them. Fight for humanity. Fight for all the species they have destroyed, and make them regret ever laying eyes on our children. The recording ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Admiral Cole stood among the officers who had gathered to watch. His face was grim, but determined. The message had confirmed everything he had suspected. Humanity was being hunted by an ancient enemy, one that had nearly destroyed their ancestors 6 centuries ago. The collapse had not been an accident or a natural disaster. It had been a war, a desperate struggle for survival that humanity had barely won, and now that enemy had returned. You heard her, Cole said, his voice filling the silence. We have a fleet. We have weapons. And we have a mission. We are going to find whoever took our people. We are going to get them back. And we are going to teach our enemies why humanity was never meant to be prey. The officers nodded, their faces reflecting the same determination. They had come to the vault as explorers and historians. They were leaving as warriors. Outside, in the cold darkness of space, the ancient ships continued to power up. Their weapons came online. Their engines began to warm. And for the first time in 400 years, the Lazarus fleet prepared to fly again. Somewhere out there, an enemy was waiting. They had grown comfortable over the centuries, believing that humanity had forgotten how to fight. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The hunt was about to begin. The Zithari had ruled their corner of the galaxy for 10,000 years. They were an ancient species, older than most stars in their region of space. Their bodies were a strange mix of living tissue and technology, grown together over millions of years of evolution. Their minds were connected through a vast network that linked every member of their species across dozens of star systems. When one Zithari learned something, all Zithari knew it. When one felt pain, all felt an echo of that pain. They were not individuals in the way humans understood the word. They were one being spread across countless bodies. To the Zithari, younger species were nothing special. The galaxy was full of them, rising and falling like waves on an ocean. Some were useful, providing genetic material or labor or entertainment. Most were simply ignored, too primitive to be worth noticing. A few, the ones that showed promise, harvested. Humanity had been marked for harvesting 40 years ago. High Curator Velmus floated in the observation chamber of the main harvesting station. Watching the latest batch of human specimens through the transparent walls of their holding cells, the creatures were fascinating in their own limited way. Their genetic code was complex, full of interesting mutations that could be useful for Zithari research. Their neural patterns were sophisticated enough to make them decent processing units once their personalities were removed. And they bred quickly, which made them an excellent renewable resource. The harvesting had been going well. Small groups taken from isolated locations, never enough to draw attention. The humans had blamed accidents, equipment failures, mysterious disappearances. They had never suspected that something was hunting them. By the time they figured it out, it would be too late. The Zithari would have enough data to begin the full harvest, reducing the human population to manageable levels and converting their worlds into breeding facilities. It was a fate. The Zithari had inflicted on 17 other species. None had resisted successfully. Then the sensors detected something impossible. Velmus felt the alarm. Spread through the neural network like fire through dry grass, every Zithar in the region experienced the same moment of shock and confusion. Ships had appeared at the edge of their territory. Human ships. But not the small, fragile vessels the Zithari had grown accustomed to ignoring. These were warships, hundreds of them, moving in perfect formation toward the nearest harvesting station. The designs were ancient, older than the Zithari records. Weapons that should not exist on human vessels. Power signatures that rivaled Zithari capital ships. This was not the humanity the collective had been studying. This was something else entirely. Velmus ordered an immediate defensive response. 12 Zithari warships moved to intercept the human fleet. Their organic hulls reconfigured for combat, growing new weapons and armor in response to the threat. The Zithari had never lost a military engagement against a younger species. Their technology was superior. Their tactics had been refined over thousands of years. Victory was certain. The battle lasted 6 minutes, Captain. Lisa Grant commanded the assault wing from the bridge of the destroyer Retribution. She watched through the main display as human weapons carved through the Zithari vessels like they were made of paper. The ancient ships knew exactly where to aim. Their targeting systems identified weak points in the organic hulls that modern sensors could not detect. Their weapons delivered payloads specifically designed to disrupt living technology. The first Zithari ship died in a burst of blue fire as its reactor ruptured. The second and third followed moments later, their hulls torn apart by concentrated weapons fire. The rest tried to retreat, but the human fleet was faster. They surrounded the enemy vessels and destroyed them one by one. Methodically, efficiently, without mercy. Lisa felt nothing as she watched the destruction. These creatures had taken her daughter. They had taken thousands of human beings over decades of secret hunting. They had planned to enslave her entire species. Whatever happened to them now, they had earned it. When the last Zithari warship fell silent, Commander Pierce opened a communication channel to the harvesting station. His face appeared on every screen in the alien facility, his voice translated into frequencies the Zithari could understand. "This is the United Earth vessel Avalon. You have taken our people. You will return them immediately. If you do not comply within 1 hour, we will board your station and retrieve them ourselves. You will not enjoy that process." The message ended. Silence fell across the neural network as every Zithari processed what had just happened. 12 of their warships destroyed in minutes. An enemy fleet that should not exist, making demands as if the Zithari were the weaker party. It was impossible. It was unthinkable. High Curator Velmus considered the options. The collective could summon reinforcements from deeper in their territory. They could call for support from allied species. They could try to negotiate, to buy time until a proper response could be organized. But as Velmus studied the sensor data from the human fleet, a terrible realization began to form. These ships were not operating at full power. Their weapons were holding back. The Destructio. N of 12 warships had been casual, almost lazy, like an adult swatting away insects. The humans were showing restraint. What would happen if they stopped? 53 minutes passed. The Zithari did not respond to the human demands. They could not bring themselves to surrender to a species they had spent decades treating as livestock. Their pride would not allow it. Their confusion paralyzed them. Admiral Cole watched the countdown on his display and shook his head. He had hoped the aliens would be reasonable. He had hoped they would choose the easy path. But he had prepared for this outcome. "Launch the boarding parties," he ordered. "All ships provide covering fire. I want every human on that station recovered alive. Enemy casualties are not a concern." Dozens of assault shuttles launched from the human fleet, racing toward the harvesting station. Marines in heavy armor prepared for combat, checking their weapons and reviewing their objectives. They had trained for this kind of operation their entire careers. Now they would find out if that training was enough. Lisa Grant was aboard one of those shuttles. She had demanded to join the boarding party, and no one had been able to refuse her. She checked her rifle one last time as the station grew larger in the viewport. Sophie was in there somewhere. Her daughter was waiting for her, and nothing in the galaxy was going to stop Lisa from bringing her home. The assault shuttles hit the station like hammers striking glass. They punched through the outer hull in multiple locations, creating entry points for the boarding teams. Within seconds, human Marines were flooding into the alien structure, their weapons ready, their objectives clear. Sergeant Amy Collins led her squad through one of the breach points. She was a veteran of 15 years, experienced in combat operations across a dozen worlds. But she had never seen anything like the inside of this station. The corridors were made of organic material, walls that pulsed with fluid, floors that seemed almost alive beneath her boots. The air smelled strange, like copper and salt and something she could not identify. Every instinct in her body screamed that this place was wrong, but she pushed those feelings aside. There were people here who needed rescuing. Everything else could wait. "Stay tight," she ordered her squad. "Watch your corners. These things know this station better than we do." They encountered their first resistance to corridors, and a group of Zithari warriors emerged from side passages, their bodies reconfigured for combat. They had grown armor plates across their skin and weapons that seemed to be extensions of their arms. They moved with inhuman speed, flowing toward the human squad like water. Collins opened fire. Her rifle spat bolts of superheated plasma that punched through the organic armor like it was not there. The ancient weapons knew exactly how to kill these creatures. Around her, the rest of the squad added their fire, and within moments the Zithari attackers were down. "Keep moving," Collins said, stepping over the bodies. "We are not here to fight. We are here to rescue." They found the first holding cells 3 levels down. The room was large, filled with transparent containers that held human beings in some kind of suspended animation. They floated in clear liquid, their eyes closed, their bodies unmoving. Collins counted at least 50 people in this room alone. Men and women from different ships, different colonies, different times. Some of them had been taken years ago. Private Nathan West moved to the control panel near the door. He was young, barely 22, but he had a gift for technology. Give him any system, human or alien, and he could figure out how to make it work. The Zithari controls were strange, covered in symbols he did not recognize. But the underlying logic was similar enough to human technology. "I can open these," he said after a few moments of study, "but it is going to take time. The awakening process has to be done carefully or we could hurt them." "Do it," Collins ordered. "Everyone else, establish a perimeter. We hold this room until every person is out of those tanks." The squad spread out, taking positions at the entrances. More Zithari came, wave after wave, but the ancient weapons cut them down every time. The aliens were fast and deadly, but they were not prepared for this kind of resistance. They had never faced an enemy that could match their technology. One by one, the holding tanks opened. Humans stumbled out, confused and disoriented, barely able to stand. Collins assigned Marines to help them, to guide them toward the extraction points where shuttles were waiting. Each person saved was a small victory. Each face pulled from the alien tanks was proof that the mission was worth the risk. Captain Lisa Grant arrived with the second wave of boarding parties. She had refused to wait on the retribution while others searched for her daughter. She needed to be here. She needed to see for herself. The station was chaos. Fighting raged in every corridor as human Marines pushed deeper into the structure. The Zithari resistance was fierce, but disorganized. They had never expected to be attacked in their own territory, and they did not know how to respond. Lisa moved through the corridors with a small team, following the data they had pulled from captured terminals. Sophie was here somewhere. The records showed she had been placed in a special holding area on the 5th level. Reserved for specimens the Zithari considered particularly valuable. They fought their way upward, clearing corridor after corridor. Lisa's rifle grew hot in her hands from constant use. Her armor was scorched and dented from near misses. But she did not stop. She could not stop. Her daughter was waiting. The 5th level was quieter than the others. The fighting had not reached this far yet. Lisa's team moved carefully, checking every room. Following the directions from the captured data, and then they found her. Sophie was floating in a holding tank in a small chamber at the end of a corridor. Her eyes were closed. Her body was still. But the displays on the tank showed vital signs. She was alive. Lisa rushed to the tank, pressing her hands against the transparent surface. Tears streamed down her face beneath her helmet. "Sophie," she whispered, "I am here. Mommy is here." Private West worked on the controls while the rest of the team guarded the door. The awakening process took 3 agonizing minutes. Lisa stood beside the tank the entire time, unable to look away. Terrified that something would go wrong, the liquid began to drain. The tank hissed open. Sophie's body slumped forward, and Lisa caught her before she could fall. "Mommy." Sophie's voice was weak, confused. Her eyes fluttered open, struggling to focus. "Where am I?" Lisa held her daughter tight, sobbing with relief. "You are safe now, baby. I have got you. I am taking you home." Around them, the battle continued. Marines fought and died to hold the extraction routes open. Shuttles raced back and forth between the station and the fleet, carrying survivors to safety. Admiral Cole directed the operation from the Avalon's bridge, coordinating hundreds of moving pieces with calm precision. By the time the sun rose on Earth, the rescue was complete. Every human held on the station had been recovered. Over 300 people who had been taken over decades of hunting, families reunited. Children returned to their parents. Lives stolen, given back, but the mission was not finished. Admiral Cole had given orders that extended beyond rescue. The Lazarus fleet had not been built merely to save people. It had been built to ensure that no threat would ever rise again. The Zithari had made themselves such a threat. As the last shuttle cleared the station, the fleet opened fire. The harvesting station died in a storm of weapons fire, its organic structure burning in the vacuum of space. Then the fleet turned toward the Zithari worlds, not to destroy them, not to kill their people, but to cripple their ability to ever harm humanity again. The The Zithari had spent 10,000 years believing they were the apex predators of the galaxy. They were about to learn that they had been wrong all along. The war lasted 3 months. It was not a war of conquest. It was not a war of extermination. The Lazarus fleet was capable of both, but Admiral Cole had chosen a different path. This was a war of education. A lesson written in fire and metal and the broken remains of Zithari infrastructure. The fleet moved through Zithari space with terrible precision. They did not attack cities. They did not target populations. Instead, they destroyed shipyards. They demolished research facilities. They burned the neural network hubs that allowed the collective to function as a unified mind. Piece by piece, they dismantled the machinery of empire. The Zithari tried to fight back. They summoned fleets from the far corners of their territory. They called upon allies and client species who owed them favors. They threw everything they had at the human invaders. It was not enough. The ancient ships were too powerful, their weapons too advanced. Each battle ended the same way, with Zithari vessels burning in the darkness and human forces moving on to their next target. The collective that had dominated this region of space for 10,000 years was being taken apart by a species they had considered livestock. Other civilizations watched from the edges of the conflict. Some had been victims of the Zithari in the past. Others had simply lived in fear of them, too weak to resist, too smart to challenge. They watched the human fleet move through Zithari space, and they began to understand that something fundamental had changed. The galaxy had a new power, and that power did not tolerate predators. When the ceasefire was finally signed, it happened aboard the Avalon. High Curator Velmus came alone, cut off from the neural network as a condition of the negotiations. The Zithari representative moved through the human ship with obvious discomfort. Unaccustomed to functioning as an individual rather than a piece of a greater whole, Admiral Cole waited in the conference room. Surrounded by the officers who had led the campaign, Captain Lisa Grant stood at the back, her daughter Sophie beside her. The girl was recovering slowly, the trauma of her captivity still fresh in her mind. But she was alive and safe. And that was what mattered. Velma studied the humans with eyes that had seen 1,000 species rise and fall. "Why did you not destroy us?" the curator asked. "Your ships have the power. We analyzed the weapon signatures during the war. You could have eliminated our entire civilization if you had chosen to do so." Cole leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Because destruction was never the goal. We wanted our people back. We wanted you to understand what would happen if you ever tried to hunt us again. And we wanted everyone else watching to understand the same thing." He gestured toward the window where stars glittered in the eternal darkness. "There are other species out there. Some of them were your victims once. Some of them are watching this moment right now, wondering what kind of creatures we are. If we had destroyed you, they would know we are just another predator, no different from you. Another danger to be feared." Cole leaned forward, his eyes locked on Velmus. "But we did not destroy you. We beat you, crippled your war machine, freed your victims, and then we stopped. That is the message we want to send. Humanity does not want to conquer the galaxy. We do not want to harvest other species for our own purposes. We just want to live in peace, explore the stars, and raise our children without fear." He paused, letting the words sink in. "But if anyone threatens our children again, we will respond. Decisively, completely, without hesitation. That is the lesson of this war. That is the warning we are giving to every species that might be watching." Velmus was silent for a long moment. The curator had lived for thousands of years, had seen empires rise and fall, had helped the collective dominate this corner of the galaxy. But this was something new. This was something the Zithari had never encountered before. A species that was terrifying not because of its aggression, because of its restraint. "There is something else," Cole continued. "We found records in your database. Other species you have harvested over the millennia. Other civilizations you have destroyed. That ends now. You will release all surviving specimens from your breeding facilities. You will provide the locations of every world you have touched. And you will spend the next century making reparations for what you have done." Velma stiffened. "And if we refuse?" Cole smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. It was the smile of a predator deciding whether to strike. Then we wake up the rest of the fleet. The curator stared at him. There are more? The Lazarus vaults held the ships we could spare. The ones our ancestors considered expendable? Backup forces in case the first fleet was not enough. The real fleet, the one they kept for true emergencies, is still sleeping somewhere else. We do not even know where. The location was sealed so thoroughly that it would take a genuine threat to humanity's survival to unlock it. Cole gestured at the room around him. This was not that threat. This was a reminder. A warning shot. So do not give us a reason to find the other fleet. Do not make us remember how to be what we were before the collapse. The peace treaty was signed that day. The Zithri agreed to every term. They released their remaining human captives. They provided coordinates for dozens of worlds they had stripped bare over the centuries. They began the slow, painful process of dismantling their harvesting operations, and every other species in the region took note. The Lazarus fleet returned to Earth as heroes. Parades filled the streets of every major city. The faces of the Marines who had stormed the harvesting station were broadcast across 100 worlds. For the first time in centuries, humanity was not just a young species stumbling through the stars. They were a power, a force to be reckoned with. Admiral Cole retired a year later, his work complete. He had woken the fleet, won the war, and sent a message that would echo across the galaxy for generations. Now it was time for younger officers to carry on. Captain Lisa Grant took command of the Avalon. She had earned it, not just through her courage in the rescue operation, but through the fierce determination that had driven her from the moment Sophie was taken. The crew looked up to her. They trusted her. And Sophie traveled with her, learning the history of the ancient ship that had brought her home. The girl grew up among the stars, studying the records from before the collapse, learning what humanity had once been. She understood now why her ancestors had sealed the fleet away. They had been afraid of what they might become if they kept it. They had chosen peace because they knew the alternative, but they had also prepared for the day when peace might not be enough. On the moon, in the empty vaults where the fleet had slept, maintenance systems continued their endless work. The chambers were cleaned, repaired, kept ready for the ships that might one day need to return. And in secure facilities across Earth, engineers studied the technology from the ancient vessels, learning its secrets, preparing for the future. Somewhere out there. According to the old records, the other fleet still waited. The true Lazarus fleet, the one humanity's ancestors had considered their final option. No one knew where it was hidden. No one knew how to find it. But everyone knew it was there, and everyone knew that if humanity ever needed it badly enough, they would find a way. The stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the species that lived and died beneath them. But in one small corner of the galaxy, a young civilization had announced its presence. They had shown mercy to a defeated enemy. They had freed the victims of an ancient predator. And they had made it clear that while they preferred peace, they were more than capable of war. They took one of ours, and humanity responded. The galaxy would never forget the lesson, and it would never make that mistake again.